Hey everybody, Brian Whiting here. Hope you're having an amazing and blessed day today. Hope everything's going well for you. So today we are getting into part 3 of how to interpret the Bible, and this is the Bible is just history. And that is a big subject to cover. But first I wanted to just kind of reiterate something or iterate something. Clarify. Yeah, that's what I want. I want to clarify something. Say, I'm not doing any of my videos for that matter to discredit the Bible, and certainly not this about how to interpret the Bible. I'm not doing this to discredit the Bible. I'm not doing this to discredit Christianity. I'm not doing this to discredit Jesus, but actually quite the opposite. But what I want to do is discredit dogma. What I want to do is discredit religion because I believe religion and dogma is extremely destructive. And what I mean by religion, my definition for religion is people's ways of using God to control other people. That's really what I see as religion. It's man controlling man, it's people controlling people, and that is, I think, extremely destructive. See, dogma and religion, in my opinion, is what is. See what? No, sorry. Dogma and religion is saying my opinion and view is right, and you have to believe the way I believe. That's what religion is saying. You have to do it my way, right? And so I don't even care what religion, what belief system you have. It could be Christianity, it could be Islam, it could be Buddhist, Jewish, you could be an evolutionist, or your politics for that matter, because politics all of a sudden is becoming a religion. And what it is saying, I'm right, you're wrong, nana nana boo boo, stick your head in doo doo. And that's what we do. We come up with these rules, these regulations, these beliefs, and really we care more about being right than we do anything else. We don't care if it works, we don't care if it's true, we don't care. We just want to be right. And the problem with that, the problem is with all doctrine, with all belief systems, when you say you have to do it this way, when you say you have to do it my way, and you don't, then it only leads to one thing, and that is punishment. If you are not going to believe me and if you're not going to do it my way, then it is my duty to punish you for that. And that's when it becomes destructive. That's when and that's when it becomes death and destruction. And that is evil, in my opinion. And that's what I'm trying to break. Because if you believe something different than I do, it really has no effect on me. But how you treat me because of your beliefs has huge effects on me and everybody around. Vice versa, right? If I think that you are in such error that you should be punished, then I am going to hurt you and punish you. Well, what are we basing that on? And that's what is the problem. If I have to punish you because you believe different than I do, then all that will bring is pain and suffering, death and destruction. And and so what we need to do instead is look at our beliefs, our traditions, our views on the Bible or any other book we want to look at, and we have to ask, does it bring life and does it work? That's what matters. That's what matters. Does it bring life? And when I say life, I mean, does it bring peace, joy, hope, love, satisfaction, togetherness, prosperity, growth? And does that work? I mean, does it actually happen? Death and destruction is easy. but bringing life takes work. And that's a whole nother that's a whole nother video I can get in. But instead, we just love to yell and scream, and we love to punish and bring death and destruction to those around us because we care more about being right than we do actually getting things to work. And that is history. That is what happens time and time again, over and over again. And that's what I want to break. I want to break that dogma, that religion that says you have to do it this way. I don't really care what way you do it. The question is it bringing life? Is it working? Is it bringing you closer to God, or is it bringing you further away from God? Is it bringing you closer to people, or are you hating people more? See, that's what matters. That's the big picture, because the closer you get to God, the more you will love people. The more you love people, the closer you will get to God. And that is the message of this Bible. I'm sorry, I could just end it right there, but I have a lot more to say. But here's the thing about this book. It's just history. Sorry, I got to take a drink. It's just history. And I want, this is a kind of big thing, because we want to look at this book and we want to look through here and we want to get doctrine and we want to get theology and we want to get rules and we want to get regulations. But the reality is that this is a history book. 99% of what is in here is history. It's what happened in the past. It is stories of events, places, time, and people doing things happening, and it's their lives. And we see little snippets of what happened. And we get little pictures and pieces of all these different people's lives stories, hundreds and thousands of people's life stories, all in this book. And that's what it is. Now, here's the thing. It is accurate. See, this we can argue and debate, but the thing is, it is true. It is accurate. We have used this book time and time again for hundreds of years, and we have found places. We know the people because of this book. We have found places that are like, okay, well, there's supposed to be a city here in the desert, and then we went and dug there, and there was the city. So the Bible is accurate. Let me reiterate. It is accurate historically, what we can prove and disprove. Out of all of the books of antiquity, out of all the scrolls, we have more of the Bible than we do anything else. So if you believe in the Library of if you believe in Alexander the Great, if you believe in the pharaohs and all that stuff, then you have to believe in the Bible, because we have more evidence of this than we do any other history of antiquity than anything else. I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on how to say that exactly, but this has been proven accurate time and time again, just as much as any other scroll, and if not more than any other scroll of antiquity than that we have. So it is accurate history, is what we could say. So does that mean everything, every word in the Bible is perfect? Well, that's getting down to the minutia. That's getting down to the, what about this letter and this word and this phrase, and what did it mean back then? And I'm not going to get into that. But what I want to say is that it historically is accurate, but it is just history. So I just, the older I get, the more I realize how important history is, and that we should be learning history and we should be studying history. Like when I was in high school, we had American history, and it was terrible. And it was probably just the curriculum. and the way they taught it, but it was just a lot of names and dates that you had to memorize. And it was just terrible. It was so boring. It's like, okay, well, in 1765, this happened. In 1840, this happened. And it was just boring. There was no storyline to it. And that was just how it was. But then we got into world history, which is mostly like European history, quite honestly. But I got into world history, and that was way fascinating. It was more fascinating because it was so much further away. We didn't have exact times and dates, but we knew, generalities and what have you. And it was just way more interesting. And we lose sight of history because we think, oh, history isn't that important. All those people back then, they didn't know anything. We know way more. We have cell phones now. We don't need history. We don't need the wisdom of the past is useless. But that's the problem. The more we lose touch with our history, the more likely we are to do it over and over again. Because the reality is, if you go back 100 years, you go back 1,000 years, you go back 5,000 years, all humanity is always dealing with the same thing. And that's fear, that's pride, arrogance, tribalism. All those things are completely they transfer across time. We all are dealing with the same exact fundamental issues: how to survive to the next day, how to deal with these people around us. It's all the same. And that's why we can look in here and we can say, this is a book of wisdom and understanding through the ages on how to get to God, how to walk with God, and how not to, and how to screw it up, because there is a whole lot of screwing it up in here. I must admit. But I just want to I want you to think about something. Say there's a history book on World War II, and it just goes through the history, some stories here and there, and times and dates from the end of World War I till the end of World War II. And it just kind of talks about Hitler and what happened in Germany and what happened over, in World War II with all the fighting and killing and destructiveness. And you take that book and you give one to a Jewish person who's, like, let's say, grandmother survived the Holocaust. And then you take that same book and you give it to a neo-Nazi, skinhead, white supremacist person, and you ask them to read it and give their opinion on it. Do you think that they will have the same opinion? Do you think they will come up with the same conclusions on that? And I would say no. No, they would not. And that's the thing. When we look through this book, what we are reading is history. And the moment when we take history and we try to extrapolate a lesson from it, and then we view that lesson on our view and opinion and judge it, and then we apply that lesson with our views and opinions to our circumstance, that is 100% subjective. If I look at the Bible and I see something and I extrapolate the lesson, I take somebody's life and I extrapolate the lesson from it, and then I judge it based on my view and opinion, and then I put it onto my certain circumstance, whatever it may be, that is completely subjective to my opinion. Do you get that? So if we take something out of here and we're trying to make doctrine, we're trying to make theology, we're trying to say this is how it is and this is how it has to be, it's completely subjective. Now, I'm not trying to discredit the Bible or Christianity. I'm just trying to discredit dogma and doctrine. When we say it has to be this way, I just want you to understand that's completely subjective. That's completely subjective. So let's just take for an example Abraham. Let's just take a few stories out of the Bible and see like what would be different if we just took Abraham and said we're going to make doctrine out of Abraham's life. Well, Abraham lived in a city with his family, and he was called out of that city to go wander around with God, right? So we can take a doctrine and say you have to leave your home and you have to go wander around in the wilderness to follow God. And then he wasn't alone. He brought a few people with him. He had his wife, and she was barren. She couldn't have a baby. So that's another doctrine. You need to marry a barren wife, and if you are following God correctly, you will have a baby. That would be one way to interpret Abraham's life and make a doctrine. That's if you're a good, godly person, you're going to leave your house, take your wife. If she has to be barren, otherwise you're not very godly. And then she has to have a child in your old age. Then you will be a godly person. That'd be just saying. If we just did Abraham, that would be our doctrine. But what if we had Jacob? Jacob became Israel because he wrestled with God. So, I mean, and that's a good thing. You should wrestle, with the idea of God. It should be hard and you'd have to work at it, what have you. But so Jacob had 4 wives and had 12 sons. And so polygamy, polygamy is good. If we're going to take Jacob's life and say, yeah, polygamy is good. And you should also wander around the desert, wander around the wilderness. That would be good as Jacob's life. And so, I mean, we could do that, right? What about Joseph? Well, he was put into slavery so that he could eventually save everybody around Egypt from a massive plague. So if you get put into slavery, maybe that's God's will for you to be in slavery, and at some point you'll save the world. I don't know. What if we take Moses? And obviously that's mostly Judaism is the Mosaic law, and what Moses wrote out in the first 5 books of the Bible. The Torah, obviously, that's the most important, right? So we could take his life, and another guy wandering around the wilderness seems to be a theme. But there's a bunch of rules and laws and regulations in there. They definitely have to follow all those. But then he also got angry and smited a rock. So don't do that. That's for sure. Don't get angry and hit a rock. Don't do that. What else? So what about Sam? Let's just move on. I mean, there's thousands of people in this book, and we could just say, like, let's just nitpick and come up with what we want out of here. What about Samson? That's a kid, that's the great story for Sunday school, the story of Samson. But what was Samson? Samson was a really strong guy that was empowered by the Holy Spirit. And what did he do? Well, he smashed a bunch of people. He killed a bunch of Philistines. He, in the Jewish view, that's good because he freed them from Philistine oppression, right? But he also liked the Philistine ladies. He had a thing for the ladies and the Philistines, and so what do we take from that? What doctrine do we extrapolate from that? Don't cut your hair and don't like the Philistine ladies, okay? Just saying. All right, what about David? What if we took David's life? Well, David was a man after God's own heart, and he was a shepherd, so you should obviously start low and out in the wilderness. Same theme. But he was a warlord. It said that they sang songs that said Saul kills thousands and David kills 10,000s. And so he was a warrior. He was obviously men, we really love that. But David was a warrior. He killed lots and lots of people. There was a story that his men, when he was running from Saul, his men were around another small farmer guy who was kind of a jerk, and his men didn't mess with his guys working. They didn't, take anything. They didn't steal, because that's what happened. If you're big and strong and you want something, you go steal it. But they didn't. And then David asked for some food from this guy, and he wouldn't do it. And so David was going to go kill this guy. He's going to go kill him because he was a jerk. He's going to go kill him. Well, the guy dies of a heart attack. And David took his wife as his own. Said, okay, well, she seemed to be a smart lady. And David had hundreds of wives. So what kind of doctrine should we take from that? That is what I'm trying to say. Is what kind of, like, all these stories, what kind of doctrine are we going to take from these stories? All of that is subjective. All of that is our opinion, right? Now then we get to Jesus. What about Jesus? Well, Jesus was a huge interruption in the plans and the efforts and the beliefs and the ideas of the time. I mean, he was completely contrary to what they believed. But think about that. I always envision in my mind that Christianity was like Judaism 2.0. The Messiah has come, we've moved on, and here we are. Like, they just didn't get the memo on the Messiah, but for the most part, we agree on a lot of things. But that isn't true. Jesus in himself is a complete heresy and an abomination to what Jews believe. Like, honest, the idea that God would become a man and live on this earth is heresy. The idea that Jesus is God is heresy. It's an abomination. The idea that another person could take the sins of another and take the punishment is an abomination to Judaism, is a heresy. So Christianity is a completely different religion than Judaism. We understand the history, right? But it's a complete heresy to Judaism. And we don't really get that and understand that, but it is true. It's completely different because we believe that our sins are paid for by one man, but Jews believe that each person is judged based on their own ability to follow the law and follow the traditions and walk this out. That's how Judaism works, okay? But anyway, Jesus, we could take the Gospels and we can run through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and say, how does this play out? And we can make doctrine out of that. But we don't. We have Jesus died and he left his mission to the apostles. And really, it wasn't really even the apostles that spread the good news around the world. It was Paul and other apostles, not the 12, John and Peter were all hanging out in Jerusalem. They were trying to make Christianity Judaism 2.0. But it was all the other apostles that were spread out into the world, and mostly Paul, who actually really set fire to the area. And so really what we have as modern day Christianity isn't largely based on Jesus' teaching, is largely based on Paul's teachings. Why? Because Jesus came, he did amazing things, and he taught amazing things. But then he left, and the apostles and a lot of mostly Paul and all the apostles really were trying to figure out how to apply this whole new system into the world. And that's what we have in Acts and all the epistles. That's what we get, them attempting to figure it out, right? That's what happened. But here's the thing, history didn't stop. After John wrote Revelations, history didn't stop. I totally thought, I got so stuck in reading this and studying this I didn't realize, yeah, no, history kept going. Things kept happening. My thought was that the Christians were just kind of out preaching the gospel, loving people, caring for people, wandering around the Roman Empire. And then all of a sudden, Constantine comes along. He says, nope, now we're all Christians. And then you have the birth of the Catholic Church. That's what I thought until I finally studied history. And that's not what happened. Actually, Christianity was extremely persecuted. There's all these videos that, I mean, I haven't seen a bunch of them, but I've seen a few, that the idea that Christianity was invented by the Roman Empire and that Christianity was a way to get the Jews on board. And I don't know, the conclusions are ridiculous because one, the Roman Empire conquered you, and you either did what they said or they killed you. I mean, that was it. There wasn't some weird conspiracy where we're trying to get people to believe some weird religion where they're going to do what we want them to do. No, if the Romans didn't want, you weren't doing what they wanted you to do, they came and they killed you. That was it. And they said, you either do what we say or we're going to keep killing you. And most of the time it worked. And for hundreds of years, it did work. They didn't come up with some weird conspiracy. No, actually, Christianity spread from the epistles, from Paul, going around doing all these things and it spread like wildfire, even though it was persecuted like crazy. If something bad happened in your village and you were a Christian, you were to blame for it. And they took your stuff and they killed you. Because that was paganism. They didn't care that you had a new god. Like that's the thing people don't understand. Paganism had hundreds of gods. Everybody had a god. Every village had its own god, and that you had to worship and pray to, right? So you throw a new god into it, a different god, or you're saying, oh no, this is the one god, whatever. It's the fact that you couldn't worship any other god because there was only one God. That was the problem. Same with Jews. Jews believed only in one God, and that made people upset because there's lots of gods. And if you're not praying to them, they're going to get mad and bad things are going to happen. That was the belief back then. And so if you didn't listen to and weren't worshiping correctly and bad things happened, well, then you were to blame. And you're like, no, we're worshiping this one God who's great. We don't need to worship those other gods. Then that puts you on the firing squad whenever something bad happens. And that's what happened for 300 years in Christianity through that time until Constantine made it legal. But here's what's awesome. This is what's awesome. They have pagan writing. There's pagan writing from like the first century, 120 AD, somewhere around there, of a pagan writing that you can say a lot of bad things about Christians, but I'm paraphrasing, but says you can say a lot about Christians, but the one thing you have to say is that they love people. I mean, that's pagan writing that Christians love people. See, back then, if in a village somebody gets sick and it starts spreading, what people would do is they would leave the village. They would run for the hills, basically. They would leave. And they would just let the sick people either die or get better on their own. That was basically what people did because they didn't want to get sick. So, they put them out or they left, one of the two. But what Christians did back then is they would go in and they would take care of the sick. They would love the people. They would take care of the poor. They would help people. And that was so dramatically different than what was going on in that time that changed the world. Okay. And I think that's awesome. But back to history, Constantine doesn't take over or doesn't become emperor until 300 AD. And so Christianity for 300 years was persecuted but it's still spread like crazy. And I don't think we understand that. And Constantine, he didn't make Christianity the religious rule. It was the guy after him that made it the law that you have to be a Christian. But he defined Christianity. He got all the guys together that were the bishops, all the leaders, and he said, you have to define Christianity. And that's when we get definition. And I have a video before. So first you get to worship God, then you should worship God, and then you have to worship God this way. That's the evolution of all religion. And so before it was you get to worship God, and then Constantine defined what worshiping is, and then it becomes you have to worship God this way. But the Pope, and then I thought, the Pope came, and then death and destruction came, but it wasn't until like about 550 years after Christ died, 250 years after Constantine, that the papacy really became an influence and became as strong as it was. That's how long it took before the Catholic Church really took hold in that. So that's all history. That's all history that we kind of ignore and we pretend and don't even think about. And actually, Christianity was spreading across Asia, all through the Middle East. It was doing amazing things for hundreds of years. And it wasn't until Islam came and really took over the whole Middle East that anything changed from that. And we kind of missed that history. And it's so important. It's so important for us to understand this history, because if we don't understand the history, we come up with the wrong conclusions. We think we know, we think we understand, even though people have done the same thing over and over and over again, and we've missed the point. Does that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So in conclusion, we have to look at the Bible as its history. It is history. And when we try to extrapolate doctrine from that, it is only based on our view and opinion. So what we should do, what we should be looking at the Bible is, we need to realize and understand that what we are looking for in the Bible isn't doctrine, isn't rules and regulation. What we are really needing to look at the Bible for is best practices. Best practices. That's what we can look at the Bible for. How did it work? How best to have relationship with God? How best to have relationship with others? We can look at the Bible subjectively and ask, did it work? Or did it not work? There's a lot of not working in here, right? And then we have to ask, did it bring life? Or did it not? And then we try to apply it to our life. Does this work for our life? Does this bring life into ours? And if it does, awesome. Keep rolling. And if it doesn't, then obviously we're missing it. We're missing the point, and we need to try it differently. And we do it again. We don't have to get dogmatic and say this is the only way to do it. And we don't have to argue our point. We don't have to argue our views. And we don't have to yell and scream and blow each other up. Right? We don't have to blow each other up. We can ask, your views over there, they're kind of crazy. They're kind of scary. Are they working? Are they bringing you closer to people? Are they making you love people more? Are they bringing you closer to God? Well, no, I hate more people and I try to blow them up. Okay, well, not a good plan. Not a good religion. We don't like it. We don't like it if you're blowing up my neighbors. If you're blowing me up, I don't appreciate it. That's just how it is. So we can just ask, does it bring life and does it work? That's as simple as it is. The only reason we yell and we scream at each other is because we care more about being right than we do about getting things to work. That is the crux. That is what really happens. I can go on and on and on and on, but really, what we need to do is just look at this book as best practices. And then we say, how do I apply this in my life? But over and over again, the story of the Bible is that God loves us and wants the best for us. So if we see that and we say, okay, well, if he wants the best for us and it has this crazy story on it, well, what can I get out of that? What can bring life to those around me? What can bring life to those in my periphery? What can bring life to me? That's what we really need to view it as. How to bring life and bring it more abundantly to those around us. How do we connect more with God? And if we do that, we'll have peace, we'll have joy, we'll have love, we'll have satisfaction, we'll have hope, and that is awesome. So I hope that blesses you. Hope that brings some life to your life. If it does, please like and subscribe. Please send this out to people that you might think need to hear it. But we don't have to get dogmatic. We don't have to get angry. We don't have to fight, and we don't have to kill. We just have to really look at it subjectively and say, is this working? And is it bringing life? And that will change the world, because that's how the early Christians did it. They didn't fight. There was no revolution. There was no fighting army. Jesus didn't put together an army and go attack Rome. No. What they said is, what way we're doing it works, and we're going to do it, and that's what's going to change people. So I hope you have an amazing and blessed day. We'll see you next time. And what we're going to do is start talking about Jesus and how and why he was so radically different, and what makes the Bible so amazing because of what Jesus did, and why we are here the way we are today. So we'll see you next time when we talk more about Jesus.